Cool. We're going to get straight in. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the next edition of Capital and Craft. Today, we're talking about product, specifically the Product Mastery Masterclass. And today, we're delighted to be joined by Hugo Ostyn, who is head of product at Amicable. Amicable are a series. Where are you guys on your journey? Hugo, remind me.
We've been acquired by Octopus a few years ago.
Haha. Okay. And so now, what's the plan?
Now the plan is to continue grow Amicable and do it faster and integrate it within the other Octopus services. Yeah, Octopus Money, Octopus Legacy. So we're part of that ecosystem now.
Absolutely perfect for this podcast because it's not a podcast, this webinar, because it's going to be talking about growth and scaling businesses and building a product. So when we talk about capital and craft, we have the capital side of things. So we talk about fundraising, and then the craft is we talk about building. And today we're going to be talking, we're lucky to be joined by Hugo, and we're going to talk about the building part of the journey. So building a product that works is the first step, but building one that scales is a totally different kettle of fish. And a lot of founders, there comes a point where they're kind of the scrappy startup mindset stops becoming like an asset to the business, and that starts to become a liability. And today we're going to talk about that journey of how you go from that kind of scrappy startup to a robust, scalable business. And before we get into that, we just quickly talk about Tappable, because Tappable is a company that sponsors all of this. And we work with businesses who need their technology to do more than it currently does. And so what we mean by that is that we work out what the product should be, and then we build it. So, we are a thinking first and then building second business. So yes, we build great products, but we are not a monkey say, monkey do agency. We are a company that you come to us with a brief and we will challenge it or improve it or work with you to refine it. And then we will obviously go and build it. But, the building is kind of a small part of what we do. The value add is very much in the kind of the commercial honesty, the understanding of your business, and partner, not a provider, partnering with people. And here's our CEO, bring me a coffee now. Thank you. Partner, not a provider. And we help and support your business as it scales. So today we're going to get on to that, which is scaling a business, scaling your product, specifically digital product. And we've got Hugo joining us. So Hugo, thank you very much for joining us. Before we dive in, maybe you could give us a little bit of a background on yourself and your journey and your history and what you've been up to, and then finishing with what you're doing now.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you, John. So I'm Hugo, head of product at Amicable. Been in product management for about 10 years and always in the startup environment. So started my careers at very, very small, very early stage startups, one called Emolument, which was a salary comparison website for financial professionals.
Cool.
Then I moved on to Restless, which quite a different business, with the largest social network for people over 50s in the UK, so over 1 million members. And for about a year now, I've been at Amicable. So we help people divorce without the help of a lawyer, basically, and in a friendlier way than the conflictual usual divorce. So yeah, like I mentioned, helping all of those business scalings at different levels of maturity, and now being part of Octopus. So again, figuring out how Amicable works within that ecosystem.
Awesome. Cool. Now, I'm going to ask a random question that's just sort of come to my head as you were talking there, and you mentioned product management. What does product management mean to you?
Yeah, good question. I think it's like having worked for really different companies, it meant a slightly different thing everywhere. I think at the end of the day, what this means is do whatever it takes to reach the business objectives, and usually involving technology, I would say. So you get given tools, which are marketing, engineering, and you figure out how to use those tools appropriately to scale the product, and the balance between, one is user acquisition versus should we build reliability of the product? Will shift based on the product and the company. So very shape-shifting role, if you will, from my perspective.
Yeah, and actually, but the first thing you said there was really nice, was we're kind of moving the business forward, whatever it takes. So it's kind of a multifaceted role and can vary depending on the business. So talking about that, so, you talked about whether it's kind of working on legacy or, code base or that sort of thing. a lot of people's founders, they tend to be visionary people. They'll have kind of 100 features or so that they want to build. How are you deciding kind of what stays in the roadmap and what gets cut? And like, do you have a framework for that, or how is, in your experience, best practice for that?
Yeah, so my background is as a data analyst very initially. That's how I started my career. So by default, I just revert. That's my, like, whenever I'm looking for answers, my default solution would be to go look at the data and use it to inform my decisions. And so when the vision is from the founder, and like you say, they will have hundreds of ideas and they will have like big projects that they want to do at the same time and all sorts of exciting things they want to do. So I think the way I see it as a product manager is like not just to say no arbitrarily and like kind of decide like a little king in the castle. No, not we're going to do this one, not this one. So I think it's, again, going back to the data, is like what founders might not have is the full context, because they will not be in the weeds like with the engineering team or with the marketing team, or they might not know exactly what's in the pipeline. So just providing them all the context that made you come with a proposed solution, like saying, well, I think we should prioritize this because X, Y, and Z, and make sure that you give them that context and hopefully they come to the same conclusion as you.
Yeah.
And if they don't, at the very least, it's an informed decision. It's not that they were not aware that if they built that feature, it would have slowed everything else down, but at least they know it's a conscious decision. They say, okay, yeah, we're going to build it. I know that's going to be detrimental to this, but I'm fine with it. So that's
and is that a gut decision? Because a lot of people say, yes, trust the data, but also sometimes you've got to trust your gut because, if they talked about like Thomas Edison, like inventing like light bulb and stuff like that, and he said if he'd have listened to customers, we'd just have bigger candles, right? And so it's kind of, sometimes you listen to the data and sometimes you trust your gut instincts as a founder or a product owner. And how do you balance that out?
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think at the end of the day, like product management or just starting companies, you're just betting. Like you have the main bet and then you have side bets. And so when you make a bet, like the amount you're willing, like sometimes you make small bets and like the risk is high that you might lose them, but it's fine because they're small bets. If you're making big bets, either you're aware it's a big bet and you're risking it all, but that's fine because that's why the company was built. And if that big bet doesn't work anyway, well, there's no point in having the company even. So I think it's that, but it's not. But then you don't want to make a big bet on something that you're not confident on, and that and that probably is not that impactful for the company, or maybe like it's a distraction. So I think it's, again, making sure that as a product manager, that if the CEO is willing to make a bet, that they're aware how much they're betting actually by doing this, and also confirm with them, like, are you sure this is what aligns with the vision of the company? So that's how I've tried to analyze it.
And so let's say they want to make a big bet. Have you ever sort of won a kind of internal battle with a founder or someone where it's kind of the logic or the data didn't support that decision, and you've killed a feature?
Yeah, that happens quite a lot. So in terms of big bets, usually, so I think one that I've come across twice in my career is like having a paywall, because it's this type of things where like you look at a model in the spreadsheet and say, oh, what about if we charge our users like £10, and then how about like, oh, well, we could convert 10% of them, and the numbers really look really nice. The reality is that it's really hard to not overestimate the number of people who would convert by you suddenly putting a paywall to something that was free before. So I've seen it twice. So rather than killing straight away, what I would try and do is like kind of, well, okay, you want to make that big bet, but is there a small bet that we can do? So again, for the paywall, like, can we just show it to 5% of users, see what happens? And then you see, like, see it on one example at Restless, for example, we tried paywalling some parts of the website. The way we did it was, rather than putting a blanket paywall across the website, was saying, well, we're going to run a small Facebook campaign. We're going to send people to an article, which we'll call the premium article, put a paywall on it, see what happens. Do we convert at all? And it turns out no, because people were so used to just getting those articles for free that it didn't work at all. So I think it's killing. Like, usually it's not some black and white. It's not like, oh, we do it or we don't do it. It's like, okay, like, this is a huge bet, like, and it feels very risky. Can we de-risk it? Do we have a smaller version of it? And usually, again, the CEOs, I mean, at the end of the day, they're rational people and they care about their company. So
of course,
if they see that the small bet doesn't work out, they're not going to double down and make it massive bet.
Yeah, so actually the paywall thing, or just payments in general, is actually something that I hadn't planned to talk about, but I would really like to talk about actually.
Mm-hmm.
And in your experience of building, running products, like when, or the models like freemium versus free trial, or all these kind of
Yeah.
things, or structured or tiered subscription levels, or free and then you upgrade, or how do you decide which is the best for your business, or which in your experience has been the best of those models?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, and I think it will. It depends really on the
Yeah.
start of the business. So I think what I found out. So I've experimented at previous at Restless again, like with for separate side of the business with two types of payments. So one of them free trial, the other one freemium. Three actually. One free trial without payment details, one freemium, one free trial with payment details. So what we found out is free trial without payment details in that case didn't work. You're working extra hard. So when users are signing up, you have their attention, like they're on your website.
Right.
They're ready to, they can tolerate a bit of friction.
Yep.
The moment they're gone from your website, even if they liked the product, you have to fight again to get them back on it. So that means they haven't entered their payment details. You need to get them back at the end of their trial to enter it. So it's way more friction than if you had
You've
gotten
got
them to do it.
You've got to seriously believe in your product, or have some serious product kind of brand recognition behind you, I think, for that to work. No,
you do as well. Yes, like it's either like you need to be clear on what you're selling. People want to sell; they just need to have heard about your brand. And I think yes, you're not going like for people to give you money. You do need to have a really solid offering, I would think.
Yes.
And the freemium model works well. I think it works well in my experience in the SaaS business. So like as in people will come, I don't know, you're offering an SEO tool or marketing tool, and people will come and use it daily and come back over and over again. And then the fraction of them will convert. But I think either for that to work, the volume of users that you get needs to be really high because you convert maybe, I don't know, 1% of your free users.
Right.
Or the price point needs to be really high because it's something like, okay, maybe very few will convert, but when they do, it's a big ticket. I don't think it works well in my experience, I don't think it works well for the £5-10 a month subscriptions.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's talk about kind of the product itself.
Yep.
Scaling like without breaking, so to speak. Now, in both of these companies, just quickly remind me of the stages that you joined and the stages that you went through, so I can kind of articulate better my next question around what kind of the scaling part.
Yeah. So the last two companies, so Restless, I joined at the seed stage and went through Series A with them. Then I stayed for a few years, and then Amicable I joined post Octopus Acquisition, which has been quite lots of scaling because I think we were about 40 employees when I joined last year. Now we're about 100, just because Octopus is betting quite heavily on Amicable.
Sure.
And helping us grow.
All right, let's talk about that specific one then. Tech debt, and is it a thing in an organization like Amicable or that size? How do you prioritize it versus new features versus rebuild? AI, is that a thing now with tech debt? All of these things, I know some of that is more of an engineering manager's capacity, but product management will 100% play a role in that because maybe you're fighting against the engineering managers and whatnot. So how does all of that work in a business that's scaling and got the capital behind it and wants to grow fast and have ambitions to grow fast as well?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think tech debt is there from day one anyway, because tech debt start the moment you build a landing page and then you decide to change a color somewhere. It's tech debt. Then you have this old page built in a different way. That's tech debt.
Sure.
And that's in there. But
right.
Actually,
yeah.
I think it starts from day one, like you say. Though it doesn't start to hurt you until initially it's not an issue. Well, you have 5 pages on your website. One of them is not nice. Just stop sending people to it. Like there are workarounds and scaffolding that you can work around. Initially, it starts hurting you, I think, at the point where you find product market fit. So your users are using your product repeatedly, and it's starting to create basically like you would see, well, the performance goes down because, well, the product wasn't built to scale. Basically, what you built is not appropriate for the level of your company is at the moment. So I think the key to it is, so it exists. It exists at Amicable. It exists at Restless. It exists at all the previous companies. But I think the key thing is, because like you say, from the engineering manager or like from more junior engineers, for example, they're day to day looking at the code and they feel very acutely like, oh God, I'm really scared about that thing. And so it's finding out like, are we scared because the code is not great, but it does its job and it's not hurting us? Or are we worried? What I try to get the engineers to do is articulate in business terms, what does it mean, this tech debt? Like, not just like this code doesn't work, but like, okay, it can be like, put it concretely, like, well, if we send an email to 500,000 people, this part of the website will go down. And I found like trying to get the engineers to articulate this well first helps me understand what we're talking about rather than just as a non-technical person, understand what we're facing. And then it makes my job easier as well in terms of communicating again, what to the CEO, for example, who's one level removed, if one level further from the tech debt. So saying like, if I can say concretely, this is what will happen, rather than just a vague, this part of the code is not scalable, that usually helps carry the point about the tech debt, and it helps the engineers getting the go ahead to prioritize fixing it.
Yeah. And so who's the driver generally in an organization like yours behind improving on tech debt, and what percentage of like developers' time do you think, or do they think, should be spent on tech debt versus, product?
Yeah, so the way I treat it, for me, it's like it's as with any other product request. Basically, tech debt, I shouldn't be any different to want to build a new feature. It's like, no, well, you should spend that time on something else, because at the end of the day, the outcome is the same. It's engineering time that will be spent on something that should hopefully be valuable to the business.
Correct.
So as far as like the way I approach it, we just go through the same prioritization process. So the engineers are the stakeholders in that manner. And again, so that's why it's important to me that I teach them how to express the tech debt in business terms, and how to, well, so we can fairly assess them against other priorities. Because then if you have the feature request, which is being assessed in terms of business impact, and the tech debt piece that's being assessed in terms of business impact, then it's easier to compare them.
Sure.
So usually the engineering team will be the driver behind this is the tech debt, but with my help, so that, because I will be the one who still need to sell it to the broader company, that's why we're spending time fixing stuff instead of building a new exciting product. So that's a combination of engineering and products.
There's just why a lot of people talk, the trendy buzz terms at the moment is kind of product-minded engineers in the world of AI, where kind of people are kind of engineering capacity is, in theory, or supposedly gone up because of AI. Then the product-minded engineer becomes a little bit more of a premium. Is that something that you're noticing?
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And I think in a way with AI, like the product and engineering role are converging, because
A little bit,
AI gives engineers a way to build their own prototypes and do designs and do business analysis, skills that would typically be from a product management. And in the same way, for non-technical product managers, the AI allows them to build prototypes. So again, they get closer to what only an engineer would have been able to do just a few years ago. Now they can suddenly do all of that. So I just see both of them, converging to run like a product engineering.
Yeah, and is that actually something as a product manager you're using at your disposal? Like, are you spinning up like a no-code like prototype or something like that to kind of validate an idea, or just run it past somebody and go like, this is what I have in mind? Is that role changing?
Yeah, 100%. So in the past, when I would spend like the way it works now, I have an idea, I will be able to take it much further than I would in the past. In the past, maybe I would have like, the goal is to convey to, like you said, or build a first prototype. If it's just a landing page or things like that, then I can get it to prod. Or if it's something more complex, build a prototype that shows the logic and helps convey what I'm after to the engineer. So in the past, the tools at my disposal to do that would be like product requirements and mockups and things like that. Now I can just build my prototype, refine it myself, and by the time I show it to the engineer, rather than a 5-page product requirements document, I can walk them through the prototype, which is a clunky version of what I'm after. And I found it makes everything so much faster. So no, definitely using AI and all the tools like a Lovable or Cursor or Cloud Code, I found really,
Yeah,
really helpful.
that's really cool. So the companies that you've worked at are kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word, but sensitive. I think
Mm,
that's the right word. Kind of
yeah.
sectors. Yeah, how do you build a product that kind of remains human and approachable and kind of technically robust under the hood, though?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So I think it's about finding balance as well, because especially with AI now, there is this temptation to like, well, AI can do everything and anything. So can do customer support, it can do
Mm.
upsells, it can just do like we don't even need anyone. But the reality is like I've been using a product I won't name names, like which they've rolled the AI everywhere, and I made a booking, and he told me no, like you cannot. You've made a booking for Monday, today is Sunday, and it was Monday, and I got stuck in this endless loop with where the AI was adamant that we're not on the same day of the week as I was, and it's just these sort of things, and I think with it, it's finding the balance between like there are some use cases that technology solves very well, and
Yeah.
they should be used for, and same with AI, and there are some other things where a human is necessary, and that's what we found at Amicable. It's technology will take the user to a certain point. They will book a call, they will read about divorce, they will get some guidelines. But by the time it comes to actually negotiating with their ex-partner, like all the really sensitive stuff, like who gets the kids and things like that, like I think there is a need for a human interaction. So it's finding like handing over basically technology passes over the user to a human. It's identifying what's like, again, being very clear on what technology does well and what a human does much better.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's been.
Yeah. And actually, the use of AI, I want to talk about that a
Mm.
little bit more in that product thing. Is, have you experimented with finding that balance, and have you had any kind of negative pushback from your kind of users in terms of, I don't want to talk to a bot, let me talk to a human, or like how are you balancing that?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. So one thing we've built at Amicable, so we had a project called Split Happens, which is basically for children of parents who have divorced.
Yep.
And it's at the moment the problem with children, like they will just, if their parents are divorced, they will just go online. They might go and chat to a random chatbot. They might just go to some dodgy website. They might just go on the forum where someone will give them terrible advice. There was no real resources out there. So we partnered with a charity called Restored Lives to build like an AI chatbot called Zuni that will help children navigate the divorce of their parents. So like they could
Okay.
ask question like, oh, am I being selfish for not wanting to go live with my dad, or like who keeps the dog, or like just anything that children or teenagers would ask to divorce. So
Sure.
we've used AI to do that, and it worked really well, and it's helping lots of children at the moment. But now an issue is that like it's where to stop, because there's safeguarding issues that come with that. Of
Of
course, like if
course.
what do we do when someone talks about self-harm, for example, or
Hmm.
if they like the conversation goes into a really dangerous direction. So it's about being really clear with AI, like, and being like deciding, okay, what's a risk level that we tolerate, and when do we stop the conversation. So it's having, again, it's the right triggers. So whether those
Yeah.
triggers are automated or whether there's a human looking at it, but like saying like, no, like the moment this happens, that stops.
Yeah.
And I think so here it's a very sensitive topic. So it's very important that we get it right. But I think it's even for less sensitive things, like, again, if the user gets really frustrated, um, it's something you need to take into account. So it's being clear, like when you build AI, like, okay, when does it start? What's its purpose? When does it stop? Rather than just, we have a bot, let's put it in front of users and everybody will live happy forever after. So it's being very clear from the onset of what you're trying to achieve with that AI.
Cool, cool. Okay, cool. We're going to move on from AI now.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about like kind of the due diligence and your
Yeah.
experience with that, and say whether it be, or just talk about your experience of due diligence in general, from kind of an investor coming in or an acquirer in the case of
Yeah.
Amicable, and sort of how that plays out, how much under the hood they get in terms of the technical side of the business, or what are they specifically looking at in your experience from a product manager?
Yeah, that makes sense. So like you said, I think it will depend on the business, on which business you're working on. I think, like if
Yeah.
it's a deep tech, like of course, I'm sure I haven't worked in those businesses. I'm sure investors will get very deep in the weed.
Yeah.
With those, in my experience as a product manager, they haven't, because of my role, I haven't really been involved so much in what is the tech about. What they cared about was the metrics, like what was the lifetime value, what's the engagement, what's the conversion rate, and are those metrics good compared to our benchmarks?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's the underlying tech, like, because if the tech is not good, those metrics would be horrible as well. So I've seen it more from that angle. So again,
Yeah.
cost of acquisition and lifetime value have been the one that seem to
What do you think is more
slow them.
important to them, though? The underlying tech, or surely got to be the other one, the lifetime value and the cost of acquisition? No, certainly at Series A.
I would think so, yes, because you can have the other tech in itself. Like, I mean, you can have brilliant tech doing something that no one wants to use, in which case I don't know why an investor would get involved. So I think cost of acquisition, lifetime value is probably is the entry point. If you don't have those, I don't think they would go any further anyway. You probably wouldn't have big chats about Series A with those investors. Now, if you're in the sector, like I think, probably I would say like a regulated industry, for example, like a fintech or like or something like a medical startup. Like I think after this, like they would probably get much closer to the tech. Like, okay, how do it work? How do you handle this complexity, this regulation? So I think it depends on industry per industry. On the
Yeah, because there's compliance and there's security risks and all this sort of stuff. So so actually, let's go further forward, backwards into the journey in terms of let's assume I'm a sort of a seed stage founder, and I'm sort of starting to make my first hires from a product manager's point of view. And we just talked about the kind of the importance of the lifetime value of customers and customer acquisition costs and all these sort of things. What's an important hire? Because I'm biased because I work for a software studio, because a lot of founders will rush to hire tons of in-house developers and maybe a CTO and stuff like that quite early on in their journey, and I often question why they're doing that. And I think it stems from kind of they are very much product led and they love the product and they love the idea of building stuff. But actually, I often think that a good product manager at that early stage will add more value to the business because it's going to drive the business forward. The tech, as we've just discovered, isn't as important as the actual product and building something for the right people, right? But I might be wrong, and talk to me about your experience of that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think it depends on the profile of the CEO. Like if it's someone who has, but yes, I agree with you that usually they don't benefit from having like I don't know what people on X call a 10X engineer, where like they're just brilliant technically and they can do like really deep tech work. I think it's very rare that a startup would need that at that stage. And that's a fallacy that I've seen people just go to, like, if you get the best engineer, like they will build the best product. And no, that's not how it works in the end. It's messier than that in the early stages. So it depends on the profile of the CEO, because a product manager, I think, works well with a CEO that's either maybe very, very technical and not like doesn't understand, like bridging the gap, like not really understanding like marketing, user acquisition, design. So in that case, product manager is kind of like, I would say, an easy way to get all of those skills in-house and help get things off the ground.
Yeah.
And similarly, if the CEO is very like business focused, but has no understanding whatsoever of technology, what can be built, what's easy to build, what's not, then a product manager can help bridge that gap, and like they bring the technology understanding that the CEO is missing, and they can inform decision about, well, do we need an engineer or not, rather than just jumping into the conclusion that they should hire an engineer.
Yeah, absolutely. So how you talked about the technical side of things, how technical does a modern day product manager need to be, or not?
Yeah, I think so with AI, it's a double-edged sword, because anyone non-technical can just build stuff, and that's great. Now the problem is, like, if you're non-technical and you're building things, you will not see the mistakes it might make or the security gaps it's leaving. So it's a tricky one, because you're not aware of how technical you need to be until it comes back to bite you, and you're like, oh well, I wish I'd known that when I built this. So it's I've seen So for example, one thing I've seen using AI, I was able to build my own very nice prototype and like it spin up an endpoint. Then I realized that the endpoint was public, as it I didn't want it to be.
Yeah.
And I told the AI, so I was building it with Rapid, I was like, no, like require a password, require an API key for that endpoint. It was like, okay, of course, no problem. Here it is. Like now no one can access it if they don't have the password. I try it. And yes, effectively it built that. It says, it blocks you if you don't have a password. But what it also decided to do was like, when it noticed the user didn't have a password, it's like, oh, it looks like we don't have a password. Here's one.
Yeah.
So that's one I caught a blatant mistake and like a really random logic that got it to do that. But I was able to catch it because it was right in my face. But
yes,
are potentially like more subtle things like that under the hood that going on. And if you're not from a tech background, you might just miss, and they might be equally risky, just not as obvious.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think some kind of understanding, and I think in the world of AI, like you say, where everything is possible, I think you do need to kind of go back to school a little bit and understand like the architecture behind building like large systems and having that kind of like platform engineering background so that you can understand the scale of stuff and how things are built like properly, rather than just because otherwise you just become like an end client and a dreamer and that sort of thing, and like kind of just move this button here without any kind of understanding of the implications of that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think like AI, like, it's knowing when to use it and when not to use it. So like it's perfectly fine to build prototypes and like landing pages. But again, because you can do so much with it and on the surface, it's great. You might just assume that, I can build the next Facebook just with AI because maybe visually it will look the same and people build to do stuff. But like you don't understand why, like you cannot. So when you having understanding of when to apply and then not apply it, I think, does require a level of technical understanding.
Absolutely. Cool. So we're nearing the end of what I wanted to talk about. Perhaps you can kind of summarize a few things about kind of what you believe makes good product management, and then also what makes a good scalable product that's ready to go from kind of, what are the challenges and the solutions that you're encountering in your current journey now, where you're kind of, they're like, let's go, time to build. What are the kind of challenges and solutions to that?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So a good product management, I think it's adaptability for me. Like I'm probably biased because I've worked at vastly different companies, but what I've seen is, like I said earlier, product management just varies from company to company. And also your role varies based on who you're speaking to. You need to be able to speak to engineers, speak to the executives, speak to customers. And I think, and you won't speak to all of them the same way.
Yeah.
And again, it's being at understanding like what needs to be done and how to do it and how to communicate around it. I think that's what I found great product managers are really good at, understanding the context of what's their environment, who are they talking to. And I think that's really, really critical skill.
Yeah,
in terms
cool.
of your other question about like what's a good product that's ready to scale, I think it boils down to, at the most basic level, at least in the type of business I'm working on, is the cost of acquisition and the lifetime value. Like they're the two core metrics everything boils down to. So they don't have to be like an ideal world. I mean, your cost of acquisition is lower than lifetime value, but even if they're not, you need to see signs that if you were to do like, it feels within reach and you feel like, okay, lifetime value is not there yet, but if we do that thing, it would just that better way from having a great lifetime value, then it feels, then it's time you can double down and you can, okay, like those metrics are aligning, we should be able to scale it. Then it will, so that's for consumer businesses, it will change based on if you're B2B or deep tech or things like that, of course, fundamentally different. But for me, like usually when those two like get closer, customer acquisition costs and lifetime value seem to match, that's when your business feels ready to scale. Then whether it can scale, as in whether you can replicate that low cost of acquisition, that high lifetime value across millions of people, is a no at that stage. But I guess that's what the investor are betting on.
Yeah. Cool. And actually, there was one more thing that you mentioned it earlier. You mentioned product market fit. Can you leave us with your definition of what you believe product market fit to be? I mean, it's probably just going to repeat what you just said to me about acquisition costs versus lifetime value and that sort of thing. But give me your
Yeah,
snapshot of what product market fit is to you as a product manager. How do you know?
yeah. So I mean, the most simplistic way of saying it is just like, well, people want the product you're building, and they're willing to buy it at the price you're selling it for.
I love that.
That's where that's where it's at. So it's in reality, how does that translate into the real world? Like it's you see signs of it. I think you've seen enough, like you've done that enough times again, because you can have cost effect. Maybe you acquire one user and they have a great lifetime value. Like, okay, great, that's product market fit. So it's like repeatability, I guess, of that as well is what.
Yeah.
So you've seen it happen enough and consistently enough that there is a pattern, and that like, yeah, people are willing to buy it at the price you're selling it for. And consistently, you have an established strategy you can just replicate. So that's when it feels ready.
Yeah, because I think and like certainly at the early stage, a lot of startups can potentially make the mistake of like chucking tons of advertising spend at things and kind of go, look, we've got all of these users, but actually what's the kind of user like retention and the kind of how often are the users using the platform and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That's something I found earlier in my career, like the golden age, I guess, of startup fundings, where everyone was throwing lots of money at everyone. No one was really questioning the product market fit. Was just, well, if users are using your product for free, then you have product market fit, and monetization will come later. But it's a vastly different problem. And just because you have engagement doesn't mean that suddenly this engagement is going to translate into revenue.
Yeah.
And I found that post-COVID, it's like that there's been a shift in where now like
huge.
Everyone is much more, the investors are expect much more, like what they call product market fit. And before they give you any money, they do expect to see much stronger signals than
I think so,
before.
Particularly in the UK. I think the UK investment landscape has shifted slightly in that they want real revenue from returning customers, and this kind of curve that is built from it's a sustainable metric as opposed to just kind of we spent 30 grand and we bought a bunch of users. That's not what they're interested in at all.
Yeah, no, exactly. It was easier, I guess, in a way. You just had to show engagement and traffic, and people, okay, you got a great business there, and you'll figure out how to make money of it later on. It's fine. So,
but now we're building better products. Would you say? Is that fair?
More sustainable, I would think. Yes, because you can build a great product, but if it dies 2 years after, because no one is like it's just losing money by the buckets every month, then is that a great product? So I think so, like more sustainable, I think.
Actually, we could go on all day about this, but like one more thing then, building the products that nobody wants. Do you think AI is changing that landscape slightly in terms of it gives you an opportunity to potentially figure that out before you invest in architecting something like properly, for want of a better word?
Yeah, that's a double-edged sword, I think, and mainly for like one-person builders, like because you can build anything you want, and so that in a way that helps address niches that were left unaddressed before, because maybe you have this really annoying pet peeve, like for example, this app that no one built and no one is building it because, well, until now it was expensive to build an app, and unless you could kind of, again, going back to making a bet, like unless you were confident that this bet would pay off, you wouldn't invest like 2 months to build it.
Yeah.
Now you can go and build it in 3 days. So like all of these things suddenly become viable businesses potentially. But equally, because everyone can build stuff, that means also stuff that no one wanted in the first place. Like you might get the App Store has been flooded with just AI generated apps to the point where Apple have said, we will not accept any submission where it's been fully AI generated. And then they'll say, well, it will take us 2 weeks to review your submission because everyone is just pushing their app. And some of them, they solve niche use cases. And then that's a big, great thing for AI. Some of them are just people trying to make money in a million different ways and seeing what sticks. And that's probably not great for the consumer.
No, it's not. But so I guess like the cream still rises to the top, I guess. You just have to cut through a lot more noise.
I think so. And I think because one thing, like at the end of the day, technology and engineering cost was only one of the factors that made putting products in front of users difficult, like the marketing constraints, like as in, well, how much marketing budget we have to put to advertise our project, the user attention, the number of people who might be interested in these variables haven't changed. It's just become easier to build a product. That doesn't mean that the other constraints have gone away at the same time. No, they're still very much there. So I think earlier on they were already what defined which product was successful or not. But now, because technology is almost like for lots of products, it's not as big a consideration. Then those have become so much more important: the marketing, the attention of users, and all these other factors.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. It's been really interesting chat. Hugo, I genuinely appreciate you joining us on this episode of
Pleasure.
Capital and Craft. I hope it's been useful for people watching and rewatching and listening. Thank you. The next episode will be launching in a month, but we'll share this online and we'll share the write-up with everybody. So thank you again, Hugo. Appreciate you joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you very
All
much.
the best. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.